Hey guys, I just wanted to do a quick check-in because I'm having a really good day, and so I wanted to tell you guys about it a little bit. So today is my 27th wedding anniversary. My husband and I got married when he was barely 19 and I was 18, and so yeah, 27 years today. And so we have gone out to just shop, and we're gonna have dinner later, just kind of ding around and do some of the things that we like to do. But the coolest thing ever that happened today was when I was in Barnes & Noble. I got to meet Kelly from Bookish Kelly. So we live near each other, and we have been talking about maybe wanting to meet up in real life. And today we just happened to meet up, and so it was so exciting. That was just a highlight of my whole day, my whole anniversary, and even my husband's the whole day. He just thought that was the neatest thing that I got to meet my my booktube friend Kelly. So that was awesome. And now, so we went to Barnes & Noble. I got some stuff. I'll show you guys later. And then now we are at the game store, which looks like this. We're at this game store, and he has gone in to look at games, and I am in here reading this because today is July 18th, which is the day that Jane Austen passed away. So this is the anniversary of her death, and I am finishing up Northanger Abbey, and I'm also doing a very important job, which is keeping the car running so our drinks do not get hot and melt. So this is from Chick-fil-A. Jamie got one of these yesterday and thought they were really good, and so he wanted me to try it. It's like pineapple passion fruit or dragon fruit. Pineapple dragon fruit lemonade, I think is what it's called. And it's pretty yummy. So I'm just sitting here watching these drinks, reading my book, having a good day, and I hope you guys are having a good day too.
Hi.
Hi. Guys, I am so excited to show you this big Jane Austen inspired book haul. I have been for the last few weeks picking up books here and there. After reading Jane Austen's Bookshelf by Rebecca Romney, I did a video on that earlier this month. You guys can check that out. I'll put it down below. I probably could have gotten through that book a lot quicker than I did, except for I kept stopping to look up books, make a wish list, buy books, dream about books that I found online and decided to wait on, etc. I did make one really special first edition purchase that I'll share with you guys here in a second. But I picked out quite a few books that were inspired either by that book, Jane Austen's Bookshelf, or just by Jane Austen herself. So I have everything here, and I wanted to share it all with you guys before I put it away in my library. You can see behind me my Jane Austen puzzle. I did finally finish that. I started it about 6 weeks ago and finished it night before last. So night before last was July 18th, which is my 27th wedding anniversary, which is why you saw that little clip there at the beginning. But also it is the anniversary of the date of her death, of Jane Austen's death. And so I wanted to finish that puzzle like before midnight on July 18th. And I ended up finishing at like 12:37. So I was really close. But so I got that done. And then that day that my husband and I went out for our anniversary, I got the Charles Dickens version from this same illustrator. And so I have left my Jane Austen puzzle out for a couple of days. I have made sure everybody in the family saw that I finished. And now I'm going to put it away and start on the Dickens one. But anyway, so that's my first Jane thing. But next I want to share with you guys, this is a very special purchase. One of the big themes of the Jane Austen Bookshelf book by Rebecca Romney is the practice of rare book collecting, rare book hunting, and just building up your own personal collection with really special versions of your favorite books. And she talked in there about the volume the third of Jane Austen's Juvenilia, that was published for the first time in the 1950s, and how one could get a copy of that first edition for a pretty reasonable price. So I was like, I would like to have a Jane Austen first edition. So I went onto eBay and I found a copy of volume the third. This is the first edition, first publication, first printing, first of everything here. It even says right here on this page, now first printed from the manuscript. This particular book is extra special. I'll explain in a second, but what this is, Jane Austen had a whole bunch of writings that she, had written as a teenager or young woman, whatever, and she herself bound them together in 3 volumes and never published them, but just had them, and the family, kept them, whatever. And so then in the 1920s, 30s, and 50s, those 3 volumes were published just as Jane designed them in the way that she put them together. Each little book was then printed that same way. And I will show you more about that in a minute. But this one, volume the third, was the final one that they did print in the 1950s. So this particular book is really special. It's what the author of Jane Austen's bookshelf calls an association copy. And that means it's associated with someone who is associated with the author in some kind of way, okay? So this copy has a book plate in here. It actually has 2. This person I've not looked up yet. This person, and this was marketed as being from this man's collection, Chris Viviesh, I think is how you say his last name. And it was marketed as being from his collection, and therefore the price was a little heftier than some of the others that I saw. But this man, Chris Viviesh, was a contributor to the Jane Austen Society, like newsletter, publications, and things. And I believe that he has passed. There are several more books online, Jane Austen related books from his collection that are up for sale from rare book collectors that are asking for a pretty hefty price compared to others like them. And I think it's because he is known within Jane Austen Society in Britain as being, a scholar on Austen. And he wrote, I've printed off a few articles that I found online that he wrote about Jane Austen. And so a fellow Janeite owned this book, someone fairly well known, at least over there. And so that was kind of sweet to get this copy from him. So I'm feeling very special to own an actual real Jane Austen first edition, even if it was printed, within more modern times. And this book came from Bath, from a bookseller in Bath. So that was exciting too, right? To get something from one of my favorite cities. And so I'm just happy to own this and put it in my rare book collection. Next up is a boxed set that also is actually rare because it's out of print. And I found this, I don't know how I found this, just deep diving stuff. But this is a set of those 3 volumes that I told you about, volume the first, second, and third. And they are basically printed facsimiles in her own hand. So each of these has the full text of the volumes that she put together in her own hand, and then at the back it has it typed out in case you can't read her own hand. But it shows all of her edits and crossings out and the ink splotches on the page and all that kind of stuff. Pretty cool. And out of print. I found these on Amazon for a hefty price again, but I only found one set. So I was like, I better get those. So if you are collecting, this will be another thing you may want to look for. These come from Abbeville Press, and they were these are the first editions, and they were printed in 2013. I don't know if they printed multiple editions, because like I said, I only found this one set of these, so they are pretty hard to find. So make sure if you ever do find them to snatch them up. All right, and then before I go into the books that were directly inspired from the Jane Austen's bookshelf book, I wanted to share a couple of books that I actually had ordered right after I got back from England, because while I was in England, I had the opportunity to go to Winchester Cathedral and view a exhibit that talked all about Jane Austen's relationship with her older friend, Anne Lefroy. If I'm remembering correctly, Anne Lefroy was Tom Lefroy's aunt, and Tom Lefroy is the man that we all think that Jane may have, had a flirtation with, and then he had to go back to his society and class and marry within that class. And of course, him and Jane did not marry. But her and Anne apparently were good friends. Anne was like a mentor to her. I think she was about 30 years older than her, and was a mentor with her writing. And also, the more I kind of learned as going through this exhibit, I feel like Anne probably influenced a lot of Jane's philosophies about just what a woman really could do in that time period that maybe some people said they couldn't. Anne Lefroy contributed quite a bit to her society, and as I read these books, I'm going to find out even more. But one thing that I did read there was she was really big on trying to help on contributing to like healthcare, and she personally, with her own hands, vaccinated like tons and tons of people with, I don't know what vaccine, I don't remember what it said, but just to help with, a health crisis that may have been occurring in her area, or maybe there was a new, newly discovered vaccine or something. Anyway, she just did, she didn't just kind of sit and stitch all day. She got out and did some stuff within her community to kind of be like a social activist, right? And so I just feel like I just kind of got the impression that maybe Jane got some of her, social activism views maybe from Anne. But I'll find out a whole lot more when I read these, right? And then I might actually really know what I'm talking about instead of just faking it for you all. So I got two books about her relationship with Anne Lefroy. Again, this one I think is probably pretty rare. I didn't find a whole lot of these online, and the ones I did were pretty spendy. I think I spent almost $40 on this, just like a paperback. But this was put out by the Jane Austen Society in the UK, and it's the letters of Mrs. Lefroy, Jane Austen's beloved friend, put together by Helen Lefroy and Gavin Turner. It says that Helen Lefroy is a distant relative of Anne Lefroy. Yeah, this was published in Winchester from Sarson Press in 2007. So that's going to be interesting. I had asked the ladies at Winchester Cathedral if they knew of any books that, described their relationship more fully, and they didn't, but we were both like, surely there's something out there, because how would we know, right? So I was glad to find that. And then also this book, I was able to find quite a bit more copies, but again, it was spendy. I had to get it from overseas. And this one is called Jane Austen's Inspiration, Beloved Friend, Anne Lefroy by Judith Stove. This does not have a whole lot of really great reviews. The reviews are pretty low, but I got the impression reading these reviews that many of them were from people who were just looking for some light reading on Jane Austen, and it ended up being kind of heavy with a lot of name dropping, probably something that you would really need to know some things about Jane Austen and her society, her family names, her friends' names, to kind of track well with the way that this is written. So I feel like I'm up to the challenge. So I'm gonna read through this and see if I can add some good reviews on there, and maybe bring this book back into, the realm of consideration for Jane Austen fans. All right, and then, so going back to the book, Jane Austen's Bookshelf by Rebecca Romney, like I said, every now and then I would just kind of like, put my book aside and start searching for things that she mentioned, because there was just so much good information there and so many good, like just inspiring things, right? Just like rabbit trails to go down. And so I did so. One of the books that I picked up was one that she mentioned, and it's called Mothers of the Novel by Dale Spender. This book's subtitle is 100 Good Women Writers Before Jane Austen. So this was published decades ago, 1986, I think. Yeah, do I have a first edition here too? Looks like I do. 1986 was when this was published. And so, people have been doing what Rebecca Romney did for quite a while. And this book is basically just a catalog of biographies of 100 women who wrote before Jane, and maybe even the same thing of why they are no longer popular, what happened, And so I'm really looking forward to reading through this. I'm just kind of flipping through and seeing, I'm not sure from what perspective this book is going to come, but just this little snippet says, quantity alone does not satisfy the criteria for excellence, but quantity alone suggests that the criteria in relation to the early novels are not being made explicit. When during the 1700s so many novels were written by women and not one of them qualifies now for a prominent place in the literary heritage, it seems reasonable to claim that what is meant by the standards of excellence is that in order to be great, one must be a man. So I do think that that is a pretty sweeping statement, and that there are actually much more nuanced individual reasons, which Rebecca Romney is really good to point out in her book, Jane Austen's Bookshelf. So we'll see. I do think that, in some of this venturing into learning about people that we didn't know about, right? And reading things by women who have discovered them and are trying to make them, known again. I think that I am going to encounter some mentalities that I struggle with. I am by no means a feminist. I am definitely pro-woman, but I think that there's definitely a balance between being I don't think that we have to hate on men in order to be pro-woman. So we'll see. I might have some arguments, but I'm also going to get some really great names and books to look up, right? Like, I'm even thinking like maybe I should just open up my own little publishing company and just like reprint some of this stuff, but that might be a bigger task than I'm up for. But maybe we could all start one, right? Can have like a little society. Okay, it's just an idea. Anyway, one of the books that's mentioned in that book, Mothers of the Novel, is called Munster Village. And you can tell they have similar covers. That's because the producers, I guess, of that book had this ambition of republishing 100 novels that were lost to time or circumstance by women authors before Jane Austen. This author, Mary Hamilton, was one of them. I think they only got through like 20 before they gave up, and I think that honestly, maybe what had happened is the fact that people weren't interested enough, and that is super unfortunate. But I do know that it's possible, right, to make something like this a success. There is a bookshop in Bath called Persephone Books. They started off, as far as I know, publishing forgotten women authors. And so there's a market. There is, right? We are a market for it. I'm a market for it, but I don't know if it's a big enough market, especially in the US, to really make a go of 100. That's a pretty big venture, right? But hey, anyway, looking forward to reading Munster Village. It says that the heroine of Munster Village establishes a utopian academic retreat for women, and she devotes herself to this life of academic and philosophy until romance intervenes. So maybe not necessarily a 21st century feminist mentality, but maybe a little bit more pro-woman mentality. We'll find out. All right, and then another book, and I don't know if she mentioned this or if I just found this, but this is something that kind of could be militant, maybe, I don't know. It's called How to Suppress Women's Writing by Joanna Russ. And the cover of this is very interesting. It talks about, like, the cover of this even makes a bunch of arguments of why people say it couldn't have possibly have been written by a woman, right? We see that as we go through and study the history of some of these writers. We're pretty positive they wrote this stuff, but society has said, oh no, they couldn't have possibly have done that, right? I remember the first time I encountered that mentality when I was reading, I don't know if I was reading Elizabeth Gaskell's biography of Charlotte Bronte or if I was reading something else biographical about Charlotte, but it was talking about how people thought that it was all Branwell. It was all Branwell that wrote the stuff. And so I was like, wow, really? Is that possible? It's possible. It's not likely. But the cover is things like, she wrote it, but she shouldn't have, parentheses, it's political, sexual, masculine, feminist. She shouldn't be writing things like that. She wrote it, but look what she wrote about. The bedroom, the kitchen, her family, other women. She wrote it, but she wrote only one of it. Jane Eyre, poor dear, that's all she ever wrote. She wrote it, but she isn't really an artist, and it isn't really art, because it's a thriller, a romance, a children's book, a sci-fi. She wrote it, but she had help. Robert Browning, Branwell Bronte, her own masculine side. She wrote it, but she's just an anomaly, like Virginia Woolf with Leonard's help. So it's basically like, people can't just accept a woman wrote that, period. And I don't know. Again, I'm not the type to go off about that. I don't know, like that. This argument is not that important to me. I feel like it was an argument for a time. I don't feel like it's an argument for this time. So yeah, that's sad, but it's also past. So let's just resurrect them when we can and enjoy their writing and let it go and not be all mad at men who are dead and ashes in the ground that we can't do anything about right now, right? Like, there's no reason to get angry and, and project that on today's men and all that kind of stuff. Like, there's no reason to do that. Let's just see it for what it is and then say, wow, I'm so glad it's not like that anymore. Move on. Moving on. All right, and then I have a few books here that she would have read or that would have been published during her time. This one is Henry Fielding's Joseph Andrews and Shyamala. So there's two stories in here, Joseph Andrews and Shyamala. Both of these stories are directed at Samuel Richardson's Pamela, which, if you have not understood by now, I have a big issue with. I really, really don't like that story. But these are his response to Pamela. Will I ever read this? I don't know. I feel like if I read this, then I might be forced to take Pamela more seriously. And I just don't know if I'm willing to do that. But I picked it up anyway because it was there and I was there and it was a thing. Next up is Belinda by Mariah Edgeworth. And I grabbed that just because it's a Mariah Edgeworth that I don't have yet. I've not read anything by Mariah Edgeworth yet, but Jane would have read her stories and referenced them. And so I'm really thinking that I'm kind of coming into a season of maybe looking into a lot more 18th and early 19th century literature than I have in the past. I've just kind of kept it at like Jane and Mary Shelley, and I've read Castle of Otranto and just a couple of little things, but I've not really dug deep. And so I think that I'm kind of wanting to go there. I spent about 10 years really heavily studying the Victorians, reading a ton of Victorian literature, but also just studying a lot about the society and the technology and the, just whatever. And I kind of am feeling the urge to maybe go that same direction, but the full 100 years previous to that, I don't know. We'll see. I think that one of the issues that I will come up against is trying to put Victorian mentalities on the Georgians and the Regency era people, and it wasn't It wasn't that way. And so that was just kind of something I'll have to get past, right? So I really need to try to find a bunch of nonfiction to put alongside my fiction reading, because it will help me understand a lot better that I'm not reading, that I'm just not reading the same mentality in a lot of cases as I would be if I were reading something that was written in the mid to late 1800s. All right, another female author that Jane would have been reading, who actually wrote like over 100 years before she did probably, was Aphra Behn. Playwright, poet, novelist. She's got all kinds of stuff out there. This is The Rover and Other Plays. And I don't particularly love to read plays, but I'm going to anyways at some point. So I found this collection, which I've never seen this before. And so I decided to grab that. Okay, and then I found this. Probably should have put this at a different spot in this video, but that's okay. This is Jane Austen's Worthing, The Real Sanditon. So this book tells the story of how Jane stayed in Worthing in 1805. She became friends with one of the guys who kind of made this town like a bustling seaside resort. And then she actually used this town Worthing as the inspiration for her novel Sanditon. And so this book shows, it's just kind of the history of that town and makes connections to Jane Austen as appropriate. Has some illustrations and things. And I actually found this when I was in Eastern Washington earlier this month, when I was out there visiting family. And I was in a really cool bookshop and with tons of stuff, and I found this there. This was published in the UK, so somebody brought it back probably from a trip or whatever, and so I thought this was really nice. It's unread, it's a brand new book, so nothing I've ever seen before, so I grabbed that. I have not yet read Sanditon either, and I've not watched the shows at all, so that will be really fun adventure there. Okay, so now I have a stack of modern inspired fiction. All right, so first up I've got Love and Friendship by Whit Stillman. Now, at first glance I thought, oh, this must be a retelling or a take on Jane Austen's story Love and Friendship. But it doesn't seem to be, because the subtitle is In Which Jane Austen's Lady Susan Vernon is Entirely Vindicated. So I think it actually is a story about Lady Susan. Does she incorporate Love and Friendship in here as well? I don't know, because I have not read that book for 15 years. So before I read this, I'm going to read through Love and Friendship again and then see if that's what's going on here. It says that Stillman reimagines and completes the work Lady Susan. When I flip through this, it looks like the first part of this is his story, Love and Friendship, and then the second part picks up with Jane Austen's Lady Susan, with him making notes on some of the letters and sort of being like a editor footnote commentator. And then he makes a little note at the very end. So it looks like, it says Love and Friendship includes the full text of Jane Austen's Lady Susan. So it looks like he just incorporates it and sort of fleshes out, fills out the story for us a little bit. That could be really fun. And Lady Susan is not a favorite of mine, so maybe I will come to appreciate it a little bit more from this guy's perspective. We'll see. All right, and then I found this book called Pride and Prometheus by John Kessel. This is a mashup of Pride and Prejudice and Frankenstein. That's a really cool idea if he did it well. Apparently, so it sounds like Mary Bennet falls for Victor Frankenstein and becomes friends with his creature. And we know that in Frankenstein, the creature is very, very upset with Victor because he won't make him a bride. It looks like this story takes place in the middle of Frankenstein because Victor travels to England where he meets Mary and Kitty Bennet. Mary and Victor become increasingly attracted to each other. The creature is looking on impatiently, wondering, when is Victor going to make me a bride? And Mary is trying to figure out what dark secret Victor is keeping from her. So it looks like they've kind of inserted this story right in the middle of Frankenstein, but after the events of Pride and Prejudice, maybe, because it does talk about how Mary and Kitty are left the remaining unmarried sisters of the Bennet family. So after Pride and Prejudice, in the middle of Frankenstein, that's going to be really interesting. If it's told right. If it's not told right, it's going to be really disappointing, but it is a cool idea either way. Okay, and then I got this book I have owned actually several times over the years and have DNF'd. Actually, I haven't actually DNF'd it, I've just kind of unhauled it. I've never really read it. It's called Longbourn by Joe Baker. It tells the story of the below stairs, you know, the servants of Pride and Prejudice, and gives you a look at that, gives you a look at the servant class, you know, servant people of that era. And I remember trying it way back when I first started getting into Jane Austen, and I just really wasn't interested in it. But I think maybe I just didn't get enough to be interested in it, right? So I'll try that again. I picked up Cotillion by Georgette Hare. Ooh, there's sunlight. Okay. And I'm probably going to take that plastic cover off. I have one other of hers in this series with these fun artwork covers, and I've only ever read Arabella, and I didn't really love it, but I promised everybody that I would give her another try. So I have this. I have one other. I might have already shown you guys. I don't know where it is, but anyway, that's sort of Jane inspired, right? Georgette Hare also wrote Regency romance in the style of Jane Austen. I found this book, which is a YA novel called I Was Jane Austen's Best Friend. Jane Austen's best friend, as far as we know, is her sister. We never really hear her talk too much about very, very close friends besides her sister, but this is Jenny Cooper. All I really know about Jenny Cooper is they were at school together as children, and I think they got sick and they both went home. But it says that the author researched biographies, critical studies, family letters, and so this is the pretend secret diary of Jenny Cooper based on that stuff. It's a YA by Cora Harrison and was published in 2010. So it might be interesting. I've never ever seen this anywhere before. Again, I need to take the plastic cover off because that's just too shiny. And then I got a couple of books that I've read before, but a long time ago. This one is Pemberley or Pride and Prejudice Continued by Emma Tennant. And this I probably read maybe 17, 18 years ago. It's fairly short, little novella. And I think I remember liking it. We'll find out. I also got this book, A Darcy Christmas. And I read this a long time ago, and this is just, it says a holiday tribute to Jane Austen. So it looks like it's a book of short stories that are like Regency era stories, and maybe even use some of her characters. One of them is called A Darcy Christmas. Oh, and another one is Mr. Darcy's Christmas Carol. So yeah, related to Darcy's. This is called A Darcy Christmas. All right, and then lastly is a book that may have absolutely nothing to do with Jane Austen, but I found this book called The Cookbook Collector by Allegra Goodman, and I found it because I was on paperbackswap.com and I just like searched Jane Austen, and this came up because in the description it talked about how this writer is like a modern Jane Austen, and then when I researched her, she was like quoting Jane Austen and talking about how she liked her and whatever. But then I saw a Goodreads review that was like, what, modern Jane Austen, are you serious? So we'll have to find out. I just kind of grabbed it because the story itself sounded interesting. It says that Goodman weaves together the worlds of Silicon Valley and rare book collecting in a delicious novel about appetite, temptation, and fulfillment. So, I don't know, maybe I won't enjoy this, you know, because I don't enjoy romances. But we'll see. Allegra Goodman. Have you guys heard of Allegra Goodman? Maybe I will like it. Maybe I will give it a try. It's set in 1999. So, that is my great big Jane Austen inspired book haul. Let me know if you guys have read any of this stuff, your comments, your thoughts, whatever. Hope you guys are doing really good, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye.